Hello. They say hindsight is 2020, and we're about to find out. That is the whole purpose for this series, to step back and look and see something we didn't see before. Over the next several minutes, we're going to move through 10 counties with their one or two top headlines, each one being a pressure point. And because we're looking at this after the headlines are gone, we get to see something a news cycle never gives to us: the response to that pressure. And if we're far enough away, we may even get to see the consequence of said response. It's a long ride, but it has all the elements of a good story. And most of it happened beyond the Mecklenburg core. So stay with me. Listen for the county you live in or the one you're interested in, and see if what I say about it matches what you lived through or if it makes sense. Because that's exactly the kind of conversation I would love to have with each one of you. I'm broker Brookes with AcreX Partners, and I'm powered by Premier South. This is the mini-series Before We Forget. Don't forget to subscribe. Although the combined stories beyond the Mecklenburg core amass to more stories, we can't simply ignore what is happening at the core of these ring counties, because the influence of Charlotte is still strong and real. So respectfully, let's start with Charlotte. 4 things happened in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County in the first half of this year. Charlotte's mayor of nearly a decade announced in May she would not seek re-election and would step down early, effective the end of June. City Council spent weeks weighing her replacement before selecting an interim mayor in late June to serve out the remaining 18 months of her term. That's 75% of her term. Leadership transitions like this are significant, but especially so in the city that's setting the pace for everyone around it. In May, the region's transportation planning organization pulled support for the I-77 express lane project. It's a toll lane expansion meant to ease one of the most congested freight and commuter corridors in the Carolinas. For now, let's just say that version of the expansion is dead. In June, Charlotte City Council unanimously approved a 150-day moratorium on new data center construction, pausing new applications while the city studies power demand, water use, noise, and neighborhood impact. Projects already underway are exempt. Everything filed after this spring is not. For an asset class that has been one of the hottest in the country, this is big. And finally, for Charlotte Water spent the spring trying to secure its future water supply. It filed to roughly double the amount of water it's allowed to pull from the Catawba Basin. It's driven by growth projected in eastern Mecklenburg County over the next several years. Communities upstream, however, pushed back hard. They argued that Charlotte's growth should not come at their expense. And by May, the city was still preparing environmental studies and had not secured approval. So growth is moving fast, but water rights, they move slow. So we see leadership, infrastructure, regulation, and utilities. 4 different pressures in this area. 4 different responses already in motion. A new mayor chosen, a highway project killed, a construction pause enacted, and a water rights fight still being fought. All of it directly tied to real estate in this region. It's tied to how real estate gets built, how it gets financed, and eventually how it's valued. Now let's see how some other pressures play out beyond the Mecklenburg core. Let's go county by county, starting with Gaston. Gaston County was named one of America's top 10 most desirable counties to move to in February of this year. That recognition sits alongside a much more complicated reality. In March, 1 month later, the Gaston County Board of Commissioners voted unanimously to approve $10 million in emergency funding for Gaston County schools. They were trying to prevent 400 potential layoffs and keep the school system funded through the end of the school year. Here's the structural irony worth naming directly and clearly. The same property revaluation that made Gaston County more attractive on paper, earning them that desirability list award as well as getting investor attention. It triggered a state funding formula that cut the school district's allocation because the county now looks wealthier. So we have growth and pressure arriving at the same time from the same source, property revaluations. Here's what that produces. It produces a county that has to fund emergency needs and long-term vision in the very same season out of the very same growth. Which brings us back to that land purchase. In June, the county closed on 562 acres along Lake Wylie, the Catawba Cove property bought from Duke Energy, one of the largest undeveloped tracts near a major city in North Carolina. It promises a future park, public lake access, trail connections, a quality of life that will shape the South Point and Belmont corridors for the next decade. That is the dual reality of Gaston County in the first half of 2026. We had emergency school funding in March and a lake park in June. Both are true and neither cancels the other out. Let's go a little bit more west. Cleveland County had one of the largest single openings of the entire first half of 2026, and it wasn't office or industrial. It was casino? The Catawba Two Kings Casino Resort in Kings Mountain is a $1 billion with a B dollar development from the Catawba Indian Nation sitting right off I-85 about 35 miles west of Charlotte. In May, the introductory casino opened its doors, a first phase built to operate and draw visitors while construction continues on the full resort. Well, let's talk about the resort that's coming. It's a 24-story, 385-room hotel, a main casino floor with thousands of slot machines and more than 100 game tables, 11 dining outlets, 11, all of it targeted to open in the spring of next year. Once complete, the project is expected to employ roughly 2,200 people, Catawba Nation citizens and local residents alike. And the Catawba Nation is not stopping there. They've already signaled that this is only the beginning. Chief Brian Harris has said there are 2 more casinos still to build. So what does Kings Mountain actually get out of this? Because the casino sits on tribal trust land, it's exempt from the local property taxes. So the Catawba Nation agreed to make payments in lieu of taxes to Cleveland County instead, plus a $7.5 million fund supporting local communities. On paper, that's real money. But here's the tension not resolved yet. The casino sits right off of its own exit on I-85 with its own everything. A visitor can come, gamble, eat, sleep, and leave without ever driving into downtown Kings Mountain. One nearby business owner put it plainly. She said, "We're off the beaten path. There's not much around us." So, $1 billion can land next door and still not walk through your front door. That's a big deal. And it's worth noticing. The deal that shaped all of this, the revenue terms, the tax arrangement, it was negotiated mostly at the state and county level between Raleigh and the Catawba Nation. Kings Mountain, the town that actually lives right next to this every day, had a much smaller seat at the table. When the entity closest to the impact isn't the one negotiating the terms, it's no surprise if the benefit doesn't always land where the pressure does. Let's see if it will be good for the town next door. Kings Mountain will be worth watching over the next few years to see whether the surrounding community gets any real spillover or whether the value stays contained inside the confines of the casino. Moving to Lincoln. Lincoln County, their biggest story this spring wasn't a corporate announcement or a groundbreaking. It was a vote about how money gets split, and it taught me something. It says a lot about the pressure on the county and the pressure on the city. Every April, North Carolina counties choose how to distribute local sales tax revenue between the county and its municipalities. They either do it per capita based on population or ad valorem based on property tax value. Lincoln County had used the per capita method for years, but in April, the Board of Commissioners voted to switch to ad valorem, which is a method that generally favors the entire county over specific municipalities. Commissioners pointed to rising costs and uncertainty coming out of Raleigh. Everything is getting more expensive, and counties are feeling the state level squeeze before it ever reaches a city budget. The number that got everyone's attention was an estimated $2.3 million hit to the City of Lincoln's general fund. That was an 11.5% revenue gap. Lincoln's city manager proposed eliminating 21 full-time positions, mostly from police and fire, amidst other cuts. Then came the reprieve that nobody planned for. The state statute doesn't actually allow a formula change like this to take effect until the fiscal year after next, meaning the real financial hit doesn't land on Lincoln until the summer of 2027. So, Lincoln avoided the immediate layoffs. This brought everyone more time to find a longer-term fix. The crisis didn't happen, but the pressure that caused it didn't go away either. It just moved a year down the road. Either way, Lincoln County is a reminder that growth doesn't automatically mean more money for everyone. Sometimes it just means the county and the city start competing for the same dollars. And this year, that competition started because of pressure coming from well above the county line. All right, it's time to head north to Iredell. Iredell County remains one of the fastest growing counties in North Carolina, with more than 5,000 new residents last year alone. That growth is their pressure. So here's the decision Iredell made in response. They held their tax rate flat and didn't add any staff. The county manager, Beth Milton, was blunt about what the trade-off means. "This one is going to hurt a little bit," she said, "but we'll get you there." The county is leaning on a healthy reserve to cushion the gap instead of raising taxes or growing the workforce. Whether that bet pays off or not is something we'll just have to watch. We won't know for a year or two. In April, Mooresville Town Commissioners issued a no-confidence vote against their own mayor over his conduct. Here's what the vote actually did and didn't do. Legally, it didn't do anything. Carney didn't resign, and he may still be well liked. That says something too. The commission could not remove him, and public opinion didn't turn on him the way 4 of his own commissioners clearly wanted to. But surviving publicly and surviving politically are two different things. The Board of Commissioners, not the mayor, actually controls zoning and land use decisions townwide. 4 of those 6 commissioners just went on record saying they don't trust their mayor. That's the room where Mooresville decides how it grows. Let's just say walking into it this spring is slightly more fractured than it was in March. Rowan County found a way into the AI build-out without actually building a data center. In April, Google signed an 88-month lease on a 729,000 square foot building in Kannapolis. Before the ink was even public, city officials were already managing reputational pressure. Data centers have sparked real anxiety across North Carolina, so leaders moved fast to say this building was not a data center, but a warehousing and logistics center. What they didn't say as quickly is how many jobs it would bring or how much money. We won't know if that trade paid off for a while. Rowan's other AI story is bigger and quieter. Jabil, a global manufacturing firm, is investing roughly $500 million and creating nearly 1,200 jobs to build a facility supporting cloud and AI data center customers without being one itself. Between Jabil and Google, Rowan has built itself a real foothold in the AI economy while sidestepping data centers themselves. And then there's downtown Salisbury, where a decade-long deal finally closed. In June, the Wallace family completed its purchase of the Plaza, the city's most iconic downtown building, which the Wallaces themselves owned from 1914 to 1960. The city had been its reluctant landlord since a 1989 donation required it for a period of time. The Wallaces won a bid and are now committing more than $11 million to a building that's sat only partly renovated for 40 years. It's a small but human-scale bet next to a Google or Jabil, but it's still a bet that Salisbury's downtown is worth the investment. Now let's go to Cabarrus County. Cabarrus had a less noisy first half, but both of its stories carry more weight than they first appear. We're going to start with Momentic Brands, the company behind sportswear names like Augusta, Badger, and Holloway. This spring, it finished consolidating 6 distribution centers across 6 states into one facility in Kannapolis. That brought 700 jobs under one roof. And that's a real win for Cabarrus. It's also, honestly, someone else's loss. To make room for Kannapolis, Momentic closed distribution centers in Georgia, Ohio, and Oregon. They cut more than 140 jobs across those states, citing rising costs and softer demand. Cabarrus didn't create 700 new jobs out of nothing. It won a competition other states lost. Then there's Concord Paget Regional Airport, where Avelo Airlines expanded its base from 2 aircraft to 3. That sounds like simple growth. It isn't. Avelo has already shown Concord it will cut fast when a market doesn't work. This January, after recapitalization, Avelo consolidated down to 5 bases nationally, closing 3 entirely, including 2 other North Carolina airports. Its own explanation for the North Carolina cuts was pretty blunt. Raleigh-Durham and Wilmington were bigger airports with too much competition. Concord is different, smaller, and less contested. Avelo is small enough to make those kind of adjustments quickly. Concord will need to be just as agile and just as prepared to move in tandem if things change. 2 stories, same pattern underneath. At least for the first half of 2026, Cabarrus is where a company decides to concentrate after weighing where to walk away. Let's go south, or at least a little more south, to Union. Union County had a quiet year, but there are 3 things that are worth knowing. Union got pulled into the same fight that killed Charlotte's I-77 toll project. When the state threatened that any municipality voting against the project will help repay the $60 million already spent designing it, Monroe was quick to reverse its vote. Mayor Robert Burns didn't dress it up either. He said losing state road funding could potentially cost individuals their jobs. Separately, the state set aside nearly $200 million to widen Old Monroe Road into a 4-lane corridor. On the growth side, Waxah's housing pipeline is growing faster than its roads. The town funded a modest downtown fix this spring to one of their roads, but the bigger one, which is widening NC-16, isn't expected until 2030. In May, Monroe brought a new pipeline online, easing pressure during a drought. That water pipeline was built and approved in about 5 weeks. Union is quiet. It's also busy with long-standing sewer capacity issues. Now that we've done all the North Carolina counties, let's start with South Carolina on the south side, Lancaster. Lancaster's population is growing fast, and one small corner of it is growing the fastest. Indian Land. It's the panhandle just south of Ballantyne, with population up 19% since 2020. In April, County Council approved a 605-acre, up to 926-home subdivision from Lennar Homes on a split vote after months of contentious hearings. County staff had already calculated the cost of this addition. It was roughly $2 million a year in ongoing public safety expenses once the development is fully built out. Lennar agreed to kick in $4.5 million as part of the deal. That's not a permanent fix. It's simply a bridge, enough to cover the gap a few years until the new homes are built, occupied, and finally paying the property taxes that are supposed to fund all of this going forward. The same pressure is filling waiting rooms, not just subdivisions. More than 90% of people in Indian Land have been leaving the state entirely just to get health care. In June, construction crews finished the outer structure of Indian Land's Medical Center. The pavilion opens next spring, and the full hospital will open in 2028. Now, a little more west again. On the south side, though, we go to York County. York is the most complex ring county story of the first half of 2026, and it deserves some nuance. In June, the mystery company behind Project Palmetto Rock finally got a name. Octapharma, a Swiss biopharmaceutical company planning a headquarters and advanced manufacturing campus in Rock Hill, on the site of the Carolina Panthers' failed practice facility. Remember that? $1.5 billion in investment, roughly 1,250 jobs, many paying six figures. On June 29th, York County Council approved the incentive agreement unanimously. That same meeting, Council also passed a 9-month pause on new data center approvals across unincorporated parts of the county. That's its own version of the moratorium Charlotte adopted the same month. But approving the deal for Octapharma wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a fight over money. Sound familiar? York County, the city of Rock Hill, and the Rock Hill School District all share in the tax revenue this project generates. And by the time the research was completed for this episode, the fight was still playing out in public. It was ugly enough that Rock Hill's own mayor warned publicly that the county's proposed changes could kill the deal entirely. It's a reminder that landing the big win is only step one. Figuring out who gets to keep the winnings is its own battle. Then there's the other York County story from this spring. Silfab Solar. A solar manufacturer in Fort Mill had 2 chemical leaks in 3 days in March. A potassium hydroxide leak on March 3rd, followed by a hydrofluoric acid leak on March 5th. Flint Hill Elementary School, just a few hundred yards away, closed for days. State regulators issued a total stop order, and Silfab agreed to halt manufacturing entirely. The Fort Mill School District passed a formal resolution stating neither leak was reported to the district by the county or the company, and it called for the plant's complete removal. Silfab won't be allowed to resume using those chemicals until it agrees to bring in an outside engineer and commit to notifying regulators of any future incident. On a lighter note out of Fort Mill, local builder Knott's Builders built this year's HGTV Dream Home on Lake Wylie. It's a nice bit of national spotlight for our hometown name. Congrats, Carla. Every fast-growing county in this episode is trying to balance growth with safety. York just made that balance harder to ignore than anywhere else. The same county chasing a $1.5 billion biopharmaceutical campus is also the county that put a chemical plant a few hundred yards away from an elementary school. Growth and safety aren't opposites, but this spring York County found out the hard way that they don't automatically look after each other either. And finally, last but certainly not least, is Chester. In March, Chester County's administrator confirmed what many had quietly suspected for 2 years. Albemarle Corporation's $1.3 billion lithium hydroxide plant in Richburg was not coming, at least not for now. And this isn't a story about Albemarle failing to deliver on a promise made in bad faith. It's a story about external pressure landing on a single project twice. Albemarle wasn't the only company holding back. It was one of the many caught in the same current. But Chester had a real win this spring also. Officine Macaferi, an Italian infrastructure engineering company, announced in March it would invest in a major expansion of its Fort Lawn facility, more than tripling its footprint to over 130,000 square feet and creating roughly 75 new jobs. By June 5th, the facility was open, ribbon cut, with Chester County's own economic development leadership standing alongside company executives and the state's commerce secretary. Announcement to open inside of 3 months. That's the kind of pace most counties in this region only dream about. And it's not luck. Chester sits on a short line railroad that connects directly to both Norfolk Southern and CSX, which lets industrial tenants avoid being locked into a single freight carrier and often saves them 20 to 30% on shipping costs. That's the quiet infrastructure advantage behind almost every major company that's chosen Chester over the years. It's also a team advantage. Karen Davison of Chester County Economic Development was named one of North America's top 50 economic developers for 2026 this June. It's a small department, but small does not mean weak. It takes real leadership and heart to keep landing wins like McAferry, while also being the county willing to say out loud that Albemarle is not coming. Chester County isn't a story of failure, but of resilience. It reminds us of the gap between a promise made at a podium and what actually shows up years later. This spring, Chester answered that gap with a faster win, a national award, and an honest press release about the one that didn't come through. And that deserves respect. So now that we've had the hindsight, what does it actually show us? It shows us that it wasn't just Charlotte. There's clearly more to this region's story than the 4 pressures we started with at the core. 10 counties, 10 different situations, ranging from a casino opening, a tax formula quietly threatening a city's police and fire budget, a biopharmaceutical deal nearly derailed by a fight over who gets to keep the money, a manufacturer that opened in 12 weeks flat, and more. Different headlines, same underlying pattern. Growth does not stay where it starts. It moves outward, and wherever the pressure lands, something gets put to the test. Leadership, budgets, infrastructure, safety, systems, communities, and more. When there's pressure on a pipe, it will show where it leaks. Pressure alone doesn't decide what happens next, though. The decisions made under that pressure do, including the decisions that nobody consciously made at all, the risks nobody stress tested, the outcomes nobody planned for. In real time, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between a considered bet and a blind spot. That's exactly why this one-time mini-series exists. 6 months later, with the headlines settled and the consequences visible, you can go back and actually see it. Which decisions held up, which ones didn't, and which ones were never really decisions at all. Not everyone watching these headlines cares about real estate. Some people care about jobs, some care about the money, some care only about the people. But real estate might be the closest thing we have to a true utility today, maybe even more fundamental than a utility because it's essential. No land, no life for any of us. We can go without power and water for a night, and we may even lose a loved one, but we cannot go without land. So whether you're watching the jobs, the money, or the people, sooner or later, all 3 roads rely on what happens to the land underneath them. Because under all is the land. I'm broker Brookes with AcreX Partners, and I'm powered by Premier South. This is the mini-series Before We Forget. We've got 1 more episode left. In the next episode, we go under the deal. We've looked at the headlines, the market, the local ground, but real estate does not only move because buyers want to buy, sellers want to sell, builders want to build. Real estate moves inside a system of rules with local governments trying to interpret all of it in real time. And in the first half of 2026, some of those rules shifted quietly. They weren't in the evening news, but they shifted in ways that could affect what gets built, financed, delayed, insured, or what becomes too risky to touch. Because sometimes the most important force in real estate is not the building, the land, or the buyer or the seller. It's the rule book. We will be back with episode 5, where the rules changed.